Level 1. The Gravel Road Wheelie Kid. You're 13 years old in Marlinton, West Virginia, a town of about 900 people tucked into Pocahontas County, where the pavement gives out 2 blocks past the courthouse, and the road behind your house is just packed gravel and mud ruts that freeze solid every February. The bike isn't yours. Not really. It belonged to your older cousin, who rode it for 2 summers before he got a truck and lost interest, and it sat under a blue tarp in your grandfather's barn for 3 years before somebody remembered it was there. It's a steel frame mongoose, no suspension front or rear, a frame 2 sizes too big, and tires so worn the tread looks like a coin somebody's been rubbing for luck. The rear brake cable snapped sometime before you got it, and nobody's ever replaced it. The front brake works if you squeeze early and hope. You don't know what a derailleur is, but you know the chain skips onto the wrong gear the second you stand up to pedal hard, and you've learned to just ride through it like it's nothing. Every afternoon after the bus drops you off, you take the bike down to the gravel stretch along the Greenbrier River, the flat straightaway past the old rail depot where you can build speed without much pedaling because the ground tips just slightly downhill. You're trying to wheelie. You've watched it 100 times on your cousin's hand-me-down phone, older riders lifting the front end like it costs them nothing. Your first 40 tries end the same way: the wheel comes up too fast, and you loop out backward into the gravel, or it barely lifts and slaps back down before you've even shifted your weight. You crash so often your mom stops asking about the scrapes on your forearms. She just hands you the peroxide and goes back to whatever she was doing. You don't stop. You start leaning back a beat later than feels natural, feeding the pedal stroke into it instead of just yanking the bars up. And one evening, with the sun dropping behind Droop Mountain and nobody around to see it, the front wheel comes up and holds 3 seconds, 4 before you bail sideways into the weeds along the ditch. 4 seconds. You lie there in the wet grass laughing at nothing, at the sky, because you just did the thing 40 crashes couldn't teach you, on a bike with 1 dead brake, on a gravel road nobody else in town has ever thought twice about. That's where it starts, not in a shop. Not with real gear. In a town most people drive straight through without slowing down, on a bike that was never supposed to be yours, with a stubbornness that won't let the falling matter more than the 4 seconds it stayed up. Level 2. The Hardtail Jumper. You're 15, and you've saved up from mowing yards and stacking cordwood for half the county enough to buy a used Diamondback hardtail off a flyer pinned to the corkboard at the IGA. It has a front fork, technically. Maybe 1.5 inches of travel that feels more like a suggestion than actual suspension. But next to the rigid mongoose, it feels like a different machine entirely. There's no bike shop within 40 minutes of Marlinton, so you teach yourself, sitting on the porch with the front wheel spinning in a truing stand you built out of a broom handle screwed to a milk crate, loosening and tightening spokes a quarter turn at a time until the wobble disappears. You bleed the front brake for the first time with a mail-order kit, mineral oil instead of DOT fluid because that's what the caliper takes, and you trap air in the line the first 2 tries, the lever pulling all the way back to the bar with nothing happening. The 3rd try, you get it right. The lever goes firm under your finger, and you understand for the first time that a bike isn't just something you ride. It's something you can fix with your own hands if you're willing to get it wrong a few times first. Behind the old feed store on 2nd Avenue, there's a loading dock with a set of concrete steps, maybe a foot high, and that becomes your terrain park. You session those same steps for 2 weeks straight, learning to pop the front wheel first and let the back follow, landing flat, landing nose heavy, eventually landing clean. Kids from school start riding over after practice just to watch. Nobody in Marlinton has ever really jumped a bike with any intention before, not like this, and without asking for it, you become the kid who does that. It's a small thing. It changes how you walk into a room. Level 3. The Full Suspension Shredder. You're 17, and the bike that changes everything shows up as a listing on Facebook Marketplace, a 2015 Specialized Stump Jumper, aluminum, scratched up but real, with actual rear travel and a fork that moves the way a fork is supposed to move. You save for 8 months, working weekends, stocking shelves at the hardware store in Buckeye, catching a ride with a neighbor 20 minutes each way because you don't have a car yet. You hand over cash that represents your entire summer to a guy in Elkins who barely looks up from his truck radio while he counts it twice. Your neighbor drives the bike home in his truck bed, and you ride it the last 2 miles from the tailgate, and it feels like a different sport entirely. Suddenly, the technical single track up on T Creek Mountain, the stuff with the loose rock and the off-camber routes you'd always walk the old bike through, is actually rideable. You crash learning it. You crash constantly, tumbling off the trail into rhododendron thickets thick enough to swallow a bike hole. But this frame absorbs what your body used to have to absorb, and within a few months you're riding lines you couldn't have pictured a year earlier. There's a natural rock ledge on the ridge above the trailhead, a drop where the ground just falls away for maybe 6 feet onto a landing that slopes enough to survive it if you commit fully. Every local rider who's hit it has walked it first, at least once. You walk it 5 times, staring down at the landing, doing the math on your knees. On the 6th visit, you don't stop at the lip. You go weightless for what feels like a full second, wind pulling at your jacket, and you land it front wheel low but absorb it clean through your arms, and you roll away without a wobble. You yell so loud a hunter half a ridge over probably hears it and wonders what he just walked into. That ledge becomes the thing people around Marlinton know you for now. Not the wheelies anymore. The drop. Level 4. The crew captain. You're 19, and you've decided Pocahontas County needs something it's never had: an actual mountain bike club. You start a small group, Greenbrier Ridge Riders, posting Sunday rides in a group chat and inviting anyone with a bike and a willingness to get muddy. It grows faster than you expected. Within a year, you've got 24 regulars farm kids, a substitute teacher, a couple of guys in their 30s who used to race dirt bikes and picked up mountain biking fast once they tried it. You're not the fastest rider in the group, and you're not the most naturally talented, but you're the one who organizes the rides, scouts new lines, and fixes everyone's derailleur when it gets tweaked on a rock strike, because you're still the closest thing the crew has to a mechanic. Running a group teaches you things riding alone never could. How to read the energy of 6 tired people and know when to cut a ride short before somebody bonks completely, 10 miles from the truck. How to describe a line to somebody scared of it without making them feel small for being scared. How holding back, waiting on the slowest rider, scaling down the plan is sometimes the actual leadership move. Your stump jumper is showing its age now, the shock blown, the bushings loose, and you know exactly what you want next. A Santa Cruz high tower, a real trail bike with a dropper post, and a drivetrain that won't skip under load. It costs more than anything you've ever bought in your life. You pick up extra shifts. You skip the things your friends are spending money on. 11 months after you set the goal, you pay for it outright. No help, no shortcuts. You ride it up the fire road behind the trailhead before you even point it downhill, just to feel it under you. It feels like the bike has finally caught up to who you've become. Level 5. The shop wrench. You're 22, and you've moved to Asheville, North Carolina for work. And the work you land is at a real bike shop off Merrimon Avenue, the kind with a proper hydraulic work stand, a torque wrench for every bolt size, and customers who expect the job done right the first time. Your first week, the owner watches you true a wheel and just nods once. Not impressed, exactly. Not disappointed either. That's the highest compliment he hands out to anybody. You learn things Marlinton never could have taught you. Bleeding hydraulic brakes, syringe to syringe, chasing every last bubble out of the line until the lever feels like a solid wall instead of a soft sponge. Setting sag on an air shock, roughly 25 to 30% of travel depending on the bike and the rider's weight. Dialing and rebound so the suspension recovers fast enough to stay active over back-to-back hits without bucking the rider off the rear wheel. Straightening a derailleur hanger that's tweaked just enough to cause a phantom shift under load, the exact thing that would have driven you insane back home with no real tools to even diagnose it. Customers roll bikes in wearing every possible state of neglect, and you start recognizing patterns the way a nurse recognizes symptoms walking into a room. A knock at low speed that's almost always a loose headset. A mushy front brake that's almost always contaminated pads from somebody's chain lube overspray. You get faster than mechanics with more years on the clock than you, because you learned the fundamentals wrong first, with a broomstick truing stand and a mail-order bleed kit, and had to actually understand why each step mattered instead of just following a manual page by page. The owner starts handing you suspension jobs the other mechanics won't touch. You're not just fixing bikes anymore. You're the person riders up in Pisgah trust with the machine that's supposed to keep them upright on a mountain. Level 6. The Regional Downhill Racer. You're 25, and you've entered your first real downhill race, a Gravity E-Series stop at Killington Bike Park in Vermont, with actual timing chips and actual consequences. The course drops off the ridge through hardwood forest and includes a rock garden that eats riders alive in practice, a jumbled field of loose stone with almost no clean line through it. You walk it 5 times before your first practice run, and even walking it, you catch your foot twice and nearly go down on your own 2 legs. Your first run on the bike, you go too slow, too tentative, and the front wheel gets bucked sideways, nearly pitching you over the bars trying to save it. Your second practice run, you commit to a line a faster local rider showed you at the top of the chairlift, weight back, eyes up, letting the bike move underneath you instead of fighting every single rock, and you clear it clean for the first time all day, breathing hard at the bottom like you just outran something. Race day adds a variable practice never had. Wet roots from overnight rain, slick as ice under the tire, an off-camber section where 1 degree of lean the wrong way puts you flat on the ground. You go down in your qualifying run, low speed, more embarrassing than painful, and you finish mid-pack, mud in your teeth. It's not the result you wanted, but you learn something no shop job or trail ride could have taught you. What your body actually costs you at this level. The bruises that last 2 weeks. The forearm pump so bad you have to peel your fingers off the grips one at a time after every run. You keep racing anyway. 5 events over 2 seasons, and your finishes climb steadily mid-pack, then top 15. Then, by your last race of the second season, 9th in your category out of 60 starters. 9th doesn't sound like much to anybody standing outside it. It's the difference between a hobby and something you're actually becoming. Level 7. The Park Builder. You're 30, and you've moved back up toward the mountains, and your weekends now involve a shovel and a chainsaw as much as a bike. You start building at Highland Mountain Bike Park in New Hampshire. Wooden berms, a jump line, and a set of step drops the park's small crew has wanted for years, but never had the manpower to build correctly. You learn carpentry the same way you learned wrenching, badly at first. A jump lip cut too steep that sends riders farther than they're ready for. A landing you build too short that you personally case at full speed in front of 6 strangers waiting their turn, knocking the wind clean out of yourself on the dirt. You rebuild it right the next weekend, extending the landing, softening the transition, and within a month, it's one of the most sessioned features in the whole park. A couple of small component brands start noticing the builds and the following you've picked up online, and small sponsorships start showing up in your inbox between the spam. Not enough to live on, but enough that you're writing parts you didn't pay for, testing prototype dropper posts, and sending feedback that actually gets read by the people designing them, not just filed away. You're not chasing race results as hard anymore. You found something else, the satisfaction of building a feature that didn't exist before you dug it out of the hillside, watching a total stranger session, a jump you designed and land it clean, and feeling that landing settle in your own chest, the way your own landings used to hit you. Somewhere in this stretch, you realize the sport gave you 2 different kinds of joy riding it and shaping it, and you never expected the second one to matter as much as it does. Level 8. The World Cup Pro. You're 36, standing at the top of Cup Run at Snowshoe Mountain, West Virginia, less than 40 minutes from the gravel road where you grew up, a place you watched on grainy stream footage as a teenager in Marlinton, and never once believed you'd actually stand on top of. The course in front of you drops nearly 1,500 vertical feet through root webs, exposed rock, and high-speed berms that put real G-force through your legs on every direction change. Your bike carries a telemetry sensor now, feeding data back to a small team that didn't exist in your life 5 years ago, a coach, a mechanic, a physio who taped your knee this morning because the cartilage in there has absorbed 2 decades of impact and is finally starting to complain about it out loud. You study your split times on a laptop the night before, comparing your line through the lower rock section against the top 5 riders in the field. And you see exactly where you're bleeding 0.3 of a second to a rider taking a tighter inside line. You'd always been too cautious to commit to yourself. Race day, you commit to it. The run is the fastest, most violent minutes of your life. Your hands go numb from the vibration by the halfway mark. Your forearms lock solid in the final third, and you cross the finish line having shaved 4 seconds off your best practice run of the week. You don't win. You finish 14th, your best World Cup result ever, in a field stacked with the fastest downhill riders alive on the planet. You sit down in the grass past the finish corral, helmet off, chest heaving, hands still buzzing from the vibration. And for just a second you think about a gravel road behind a rail depot and a bike with one working brake. The distance between that road and this mountain isn't something you can explain to anybody who wasn't there for both ends of it. Level 9. The Trail Legend. You're 45 now, back in Pocahontas County, and your body carries the paperwork of 3 decades in this sport. A pale scar down your left shin from a pedal strike that took 9 stitches to close. A knee that clicks on cold mornings before it loosens up. Knuckles broken enough times over the years that they don't fully straighten anymore. You've traded racing for building, spending most of your free time now cutting and maintaining community trail around the Monongahela with a local nonprofit, working to get proper single-track recognized and protected, instead of quietly bootlegged through forest that could get logged any given year without warning. You still ride every trail you cut before you ever open it to anyone else, because you learned a long time ago that a builder who won't ride his own work isn't a builder anybody should trust with theirs. A handful of teenagers from town started showing up to your trail days last spring, unsure what to do with a shovel, standing around with their hands in their pockets, and you teach them the same way nobody ever taught you: patient, letting them get it wrong before you explain why it went wrong. One Saturday morning, riding out to check a drainage line you rerouted after the spring floods, you pass through the gravel stretch by the old rail depot, and there on the ditch line behind it, you see a kid, maybe 13, on a bike so old the paint's worn off the top tube, one brake lever clearly connected to nothing, trying to get the front wheel up and failing, again and again, tipping sideways into the weeds every single time, like clockwork. You stop. You don't say anything at first. You just watch him try twice more. Then you walk your bike over and tell him to lean back a beat later than feels natural, to feed the pedal stroke through it instead of yanking the bars up all at once. He tries it. The front wheel comes up, wobbles hard, slaps back down too fast. But it came up. He looks at you like you just handed him something enormous, something he didn't know he was allowed to want. And in a way, you did, because 32 years ago, somebody could have stopped on this exact same stretch of gravel and told you the exact same thing, and nobody did. And you had to figure it out alone in the fading light, with nobody watching and nobody to tell about it after. You're not going to let that be true for him, not if you can help it. Somewhere right now, in 100 small towns nobody outside the county line has ever heard of, a kid is falling off a bike with a dead brake, trying to get the front wheel up one more time before it's too dark to see the ditch. Most of them will quit trying eventually, and nobody will blame them for it. A few of them won't quit, and every single time, it comes down to 4 seconds on a road nobody else was watching.